Hi everyone, my name is Sanitma. I'm the debating coach of Hillwood College. So today we'll be talking about the politics motion of LKs 2025. The motion along with the Infoslide will be attached in the description. But in order to give you like a brief idea of what exactly we're talking about, we are talking about an individual who is 30 years old and is currently working in a stable private sector firm as a manager. He earns a salary of 500,000 rupees per month, and he is somebody who cares about meaningful social change and improving the lives of citizens. And an additional piece of context given is also the fact that he has a long-term committed relationship as of right now. So the debate is basically about whether you would quit your existing job and enter politics or not. Alright, so I'll be breaking the debate down in terms of the main clashes that are likely to occur in the debate. Firstly, your ability to succeed in politics and therefore create a certain degree of change. And secondly, your individual stability. This could be in terms of financial stability and also some analysis on like your relationship as well. Alright, so first clash then on your ability to succeed in politics. I think maybe on proposition it's a good move if you talk about more local and regional change first and then move on into like getting into like a parliamentary position or like a minister position later on. Since you're like an individual who doesn't have any prior political experience, if you only talk about the kind of change you're going to create when you become like a minister, if opposition manages to prove that the likelihood of this happening is like very low, at least for a significant time period, then your case becomes a little bit weaker. So I think on proposition, you can point out this is like a gradual process and you can start small by trying to enter things like provincial councils at first. So the way in which you can do this is firstly, you can do things like smaller campaigns within your immediate community. And secondly, you can like do certain things that help your local communities and therefore like interact with them successfully by helping whatever needs that need to be fulfilled in your community and therefore gaining their support and using that support to like get into like a position like a provincial council position. And after you get into these kinds of positions, you can do various things to help your immediate communities. You can do things like, so there are probably like funds that are given to these provincial councils by governments to engage in acts of like social welfare, and you can use these funds and you can prevent the mismanagement of these funds and effectively like distribute these funds to the people who need them the most. You can engage in like various acts of social welfare. You can do things like develop the education of like poor students in your area. You can have things like healthcare campaigns for the elderly. You can do all of these like acts that improve like your immediate community and like society as immediate community, and therefore create like more localized change which like helps your case as well. And after you like get into like a provincial council, since you're gaining a certain degree of political experience and like some amount of connections, later you can focus on like bigger positions like a parliamentary position or like a minister position. Here, it's important for you to prove why you are likely to get into this kind of position before you talk about the kind of change that you can accomplish as somebody who is already in parliament or who already has like a minister position. So in terms of the likelihood analysis, I think there are a couple of things that you can point out. Firstly, since you're already like somebody who is in a good, well-paying job, you're probably somebody who is educated and has like a lot of experience within this field, and that might help you in terms of like your reputation, because people do care about individuals coming into parliament who can have like a certain degree of like educational qualifications and like good reputation and experience. And you probably have like some amount of existing connections through your job to people who are like influential within society, so that might like even end up helping you within your like trajectory in politics. And secondly, you can like do campaigns after like you join a party, and I think you can point out that you can like have an agenda that really resonates with the public, and it can include things like firstly reducing the economic burden that is faced by the people. This could look like you having an agenda that focuses on like reducing the prices of essential goods, or increasing the salaries of like the working class, or reducing the taxes that are faced by like generally middle class and poor people, or something like that. And secondly, you can focus on like developing healthcare, because there are issues where hospitals, public hospitals, have like less medications and things like that. And thirdly, you can focus on like creating like a stable education system, because currently there is an issue going on in terms of that. And fourthly, you can focus on like creating more transparency in politics. So I think that focusing your agenda on these kinds of topics that really like resonate with the public and are things that they really care about will help your chance and likelihood of like getting into like a parliamentary position. So you can like focus this kind of agenda through your party such that the people are likely to vote for your party, and therefore like guarantee a position for you in parliament as well. And thirdly, you can point out that Sri Lankan people as of right now are more open towards like different newer politicians or like newer political parties. The fact that the Aragalaya happened is like a sign that shows that Sri Lankan people are no longer chasing behind like political dynasties, and now they're like more open to newer political parties and newer politicians, as opposed to like focusing on the same politicians over and over again. And fourthly, you can point out that you as an individual, you can study the political environment of that time, and you can join a party that is likely to be somewhat influential in terms of like the government elections and things like that. This doesn't have to be the party that guarantees like the president, this doesn't have to be like the party that elects the president and gets like the 2/3 majority of parliament. It can also be the party that gets like into opposition and still manages to have like a significant degree of influence, right? So as long as you're able to get into parliament, I think you can point out that you can use your popularity or like existing political experience to get into like a party that is likely to have a reasonable degree of success in the future in politics, and therefore guarantee like a spot in parliament and things like that. And even if for some reason it doesn't work out, you can always like shift parties in like the worst case scenario, because shifting parties is not like some sort of abnormal thing that never happens. It is generally something that happens quite frequently in like Sri Lankan politics as well. And once you're in like a parliamentary position, there are a couple of things that you can do. Firstly, you can like suggest new solutions for the issues that people face on the ground. You can call out the injustices that are done to the people, and if there are any issues that are not being addressed or not being talked about enough, you can like point these out within your speaking time. You can have a say in what policies get passed, because you are given like voting power when you're like in parliament. And if you manage to gain like a sufficient degree of like popularity, you're able to target even like a minister position later, eventually on down the line. Like imagine your party gains sufficient like popularity and you're able to form government and get like 2/3 majority in parliament. If you're in a position where you have like a sufficient degree of popularity and a sufficient degree of influence, you are able to like later target towards like minister positions where you can focus on a specific field, like I don't know, healthcare or education or anything according to like whatever you want to specialize on, and therefore really contribute towards like its development and growth within like your party and like within government itself. All right, so that is it in terms of like proposition. On opposition, also you can do the same thing, like prove why success in politics is like really hard, and even if you get into like a position of like parliamentarian or like a position like a minister position, the kind of change that you can create is like not very meaningful. So in terms of like your ability to succeed in politics, there are a couple of things that you can say. Firstly, you can point out that you're very new to the field, so it's like really hard for you to get attention from the media and have like sufficient speaker time and therefore gain sufficient popularity. And secondly, you don't have any like meaningful prior political connections to individuals in politics. The Infoslide doesn't really specify what kind of manager you are, but just because you are working like a manager in like some sort of firm doesn't necessarily mean that you always have like connections to people who are in politics. And most importantly, you also lack any like prior political experience, so it's going to take a long time for you to build up this political experience and therefore gain like a certain degree of influence as well. And finally, that it's really hard for you to like suddenly join an influential party. There's probably a lot of like competition where newer politicians want to like join these parties, so it's unclear as to why you are suddenly going to get like a position in a influential political party, considering the fact that you have no prior political experience or any like prior political connections to influential people who are working in the industry. And even if you do manage to gain like a certain degree of influence over time, I think that you can still prove why there's a lot of uncertainty within this field. So firstly, you can talk about the kind of backlash that exists from opposition members who are going to like scrutinize your behavior. And the thing is, like, mistakes are inevitable because no politician can like perform perfectly in some sort of media discussion or any other like thing that happens within the media or like any other political discussion that happens. So the moment you make like the slightest mistake, the media is going to sensationalize this. Opposition leaders are going to make a huge fuss about this, and it can really like cause a lot of like damage to your reputation and like cause a lot of backlash to you as a person. And they're also going to focus heavily on like your personal life and talk about a lot of like details about your personal life as well. And secondly, you can point out that when it comes to like your campaigns and all of that, you will have to lie to the public about the kind of promises you will make, because until you get into like a parliamentary position or like a minister position, you have no idea about the kind of change that you can actually create or not. So you're going to have to like go against your conscience and lie to the public about the kind of promises that you're likely to make. And thirdly, there are like external factors beyond your control, things like natural disasters due to climate change, things like pandemics suddenly happen. So these are like things that are increasingly becoming more common because of issues like climate change, and these are factors beyond your control that really like hinder your ability to create like meaningful change as a politician. And fourthly, that there's a lot of uncertainty in the field, so there's no guarantee that like you're gonna have this kind of position for a really long time. You might have like a parliamentary position within the current 5 years, but in the next 5 years, if your party loses popularity and like loses a lot of influence, then there's no guarantee that you're gonna get like a parliamentary position all over again. And the thing is, this is not like within your control, because your party's popularity relies on the performance of like every single other politician who is in like your political party, right? So it's not something that is solely like within your control as a person, and therefore there is a lot of uncertainty involved as well. And I think that finally and most importantly, you can point out that there is only so much meaningful change that a single individual with like good intentions and good incentives can do within like Sri Lankan politics. Firstly, you can point out that like parliamentary discussions get like sidetracked very quickly, where it starts off with the intention of having like a meaningful discussion or like debate, but it ends up like becoming this discussion where like people are just throwing mud at one another. They're like blaming each other. They're like talking about the personal lives of each other, like the personal educational qualifications or like any other element about their own personal life, as opposed to focusing on like issues that actually concern the public. And even if it is like a debate that is after some sort of like major event that happens, like a debate that happens after some sort of economic crisis or some sort of natural disaster, it ends up becoming like a blame game where like both parties are blaming one another, as opposed to actually taking accountability and discussing the potential solutions that can occur. And the point is like even this is not within your individual control. It relies on like a huge number of people within parliament. So it's not like the kind of like individual change that you can do as a person is like very not very meaningful as a whole, right? And secondly, you can find out that since you're like a newer politician, it's like very difficult for you to get like a lot of attention and get like a lot of speaking time as well. And thirdly, that even if you suggest like a really good solution, unless it is given a lot of attention and unless the resolution is like passed within parliament by getting like a majority vote, it's not going to create any like meaningful change. And there are also like additional problems beyond your control, things like mismanagement of funds or things like corruption that exists within the institutions that you're working in. So that really like reduces the effectivity that you as a person can have. Even if you have like inherently good intentions and inherently good incentives, it reduces your effectivity as a person because the individual change that you can do in the system is like really low. I think you can point out that comparatively, you can do certain things for social change while maintaining your current job. So companies have like separate funds in order to like do actions of social good, in order to like uplift their reputation and like engage with their local communities and maintain their support. So you can like use these funds that are separated for social good in order to do things like emergency welfare for like citizens when emergency situations happen. So the recent events like the floods that happened recently are like a good example. So in situations where natural disasters happen, you can use these funds to provide emergency welfare for citizens. You can have like health camps that are organized by these funds for individuals like the elderly. You can provide subsidies for poor citizens, and you can also like help citizens using your own financial resources as well. You can do things like savings and therefore use those savings to like provide donations. You can engage in voluntary work if you have the time, and that still creates a large degree of like meaningful social change, even if it's not like the kind of change that somebody who's really high up in politics and can create. It still creates a large degree of like meaningful social change for people in your immediate community and like really contributes to uplifting the lifestyle of people in your immediate community. And you can point out that this is like far easier for you as an individual because it is within your control and it doesn't necessarily rely on like the effectivity or like the effectivity of the systems that are present that relies on like the performance of like a lot of stakeholders, which happens on the Asset House, right? Because your performance as like a parliamentarian doesn't necessarily just rely on you, but it also relies on like how exactly the other people in your party, the other people in parliament are going to perform. But when it comes to the change that you can create within your local community, that is exclusively reliant on like how you and your immediate workers are going to perform, right? So this is like much more within your control, and the kind of change that you can create therefore becomes like quite meaningful as a whole as well. All right, so that is in terms of like the first clash on the ability to succeed in politics. The second clash is in terms of like your individual stability. Let's first talk about like opposition, because I think there's like some analysis there for opposition here. I think that the first thing you can point out is that the actual salary you get as a politician within politics is not that big. I'm not entirely sure of the exact amount, but it's definitely lower than like 5 lakhs. And secondly, you can point out that initially it's likely to be like a very high financial cost for you, because you will have to like individually invest in your own campaigns and invest a lot to like establish yourself within this field. That means like doing a lot of campaigns, a lot of like advertising campaigns, a lot of like giving subsidies to people or whatever like agenda that you have, and therefore you're gonna have to spend a lot on like your individual advertising campaigns initially. And I think thirdly, I think the new government did a couple of steps to like reduce the additional facilities that politicians get as well. This might also like reduce your financial stability as well, because it like reduces like vehicle facilities and things like that. And the fact that there's like a lot of uncertainty, because like you can lose this position after 5 years depending on how your party does, and like I said earlier, that relies on the performance of like a lot of other individuals that is not within your control as a person. Comparatively, you can point out that you already have like a good salary and there is less uncertainty, because the only way in which you can like lose your existing job is if you perform really badly, or you do some sort of significant mistake that results in you losing your job, or you getting like demoted or like something like that. And unlike your performance in parliament, this exclusively is reliant on like your performance. So unless you perform really badly, you're not going to end up like getting fired or like getting some sort of demotion, right? So it is within the locus of your own control, and therefore since you are somebody who has like good intentions and good incentives, you can like put in a lot of effort to your job and therefore guarantee the fact that you're not going to get fired, or you're not going to get like demoted or something like that, right? And second, you can point out that you have a lot of room for improvement in your job, as said within the info slide. So you can like work really hard, you can get like a promotion, you can get like things like bonuses, and if you get like promotions, you can also guarantee like a higher salary. So there's like room for advancement on your end. And I think you're going to point out that like when you rise up in the ranks and improve your financial situation, it also increases the ability for you to engage in like more acts of social welfare within your local community. So you can allocate more financial resources and like more have like more say in like what exactly you do to like maintain social welfare, even through your company as well. So if you increase your like financial situation as an individual, you can allocate more money towards engaging in acts of social welfare, and therefore fulfill this dream of like improving the social improving like the living conditions of people living in your society as well. I think that additionally, you can have like a small argument on like how this affects your relationship or opposition. You can point out that this hurts your relationship because initially you're going to face like a lot of instability financially speaking, because you're going to have to invest a lot in your campaigns and things like that. And since you're already 30 years old and you have a long-term committed relationship, you might be considering options like marriage, which is like a very costly thing financially speaking. So if you have to invest a lot in like your campaigns and things like that, you might lose the ability to consider options like marriage because of the initial financial instability that you face as a person. And secondly, you can point out that your partner is going to face a lot of scrutiny from like the media as well, because generally like the media does focus on like personal elements and private lives of like politicians. So it might end up like damaging your relationship by harming like the privacy of your relationship as well. Comparatively on proposition, I think you can try to like mitigate this analysis. You can find out that when you enter into politics and you gain a certain degree of like influence, you do have like a certain degree of like financial stability. You have like facilities like a vehicle, maybe depending on your rank. You might have and you have like your own salary as well, and if you like rise up in the ranks high enough, you might have like other facilities like your transport charges, etc., being like allocated for. And initially, even if the cost is like high, you can make an investment through your savings or some other form, and you can like later gain it back as you rise up in the ranks, and therefore like improve your situation in like politics as a whole. And you can like since like the first clash is probably like more advantageous for you on proposition, you can do some analysis and really weigh that clash and talk about why it's like more important, because you as an individual really care about like creating meaningful social change. So even if you might suffer initially in terms of like your finances, since you are like an individual who has like really good intentions and wants to create a lot of social change, you can explain why that clash is like the most important, and it also creates like a lot of like social good, which is something that you really care about as a person, given that you want to like improve the lives of citizens as a whole. So yeah, that is it in terms of like the second clash on like your individual stability and your relationship. Thank you for listening. Bye.